Across all cultures and races, every civilization has had its own sacred neurobotanical ally, not merely for healing the body or stimulating the senses, but for opening doors to the spiritual realm. These plants were bridges between the human and the divine. In South America, it was ayahuasca. In Africa, iboga. In India, soma. And in many ancient traditions, that plant was cannabis. Yet while many of these plants have retained their sacred glow, cannabis has been pushed down, reduced to a symbol of rebellion, trivialized as a recreational escape, labeled as a trend rather than a threshold. So what happened? How did something once revered as a gateway to the sacred realms become so deeply misunderstood, even mocked? In this video, we won't debate legality or medical data. We won't fall into the glamorized narrative of pop culture either. Instead, we'll listen for the echoes of ancient wisdom, from the mantras of the Atharva Veda to the smoke-filled chillums of Indian sadhus, to the quiet rituals of Sufi mystics and the drumbeats of Amazonian shamans. Because the most important question isn't, is smoking weed bad? The real question is your soul ready to step through the portal it opens? So before we continue with the video and explore this interesting topic further, don't forget to like, subscribe to the Top Hidden Knowledge channel to stay updated on everything related to personal and spiritual growth. This helps us bring more content that can make a difference for you. Cannabis, a plant that has been trivialized, criminalized, and romanticized in equal measure, holds a far deeper significance than modern debates often acknowledge. Across cultures and centuries, it has been revered not as a mere intoxicant, but as a sacred key. Keys, however, are not objects of worship. They exist to unlock doors. The question is, which doors does cannabis open, and are we prepared to step through? In ancient India, cannabis was no ordinary herb. The Atharva Veda, one of the oldest sacred texts, named it among the 5 holiest plants, a divine gift imbued with amrita, the nectar of immortality. Its connection to Shiva, the cosmic deity of destruction and regeneration, is profound. Shiva, the master of the Tandava, the dance that unravels illusion, embodies transformation. His devotees, the sadhus, have long used cannabis in their spiritual practices, but not as a casual indulgence. Smoked through clay chillums during rigorous rituals of fasting, chanting, and solitude, cannabis was a tool for ego death, the dissolution of attachment to the physical self. For these ascetics, the plant was not an escape from reality, but a confrontation with it, a way to pierce the veil of Maya illusion and glimpse the eternal. To them, cannabis was a catalyst for transcendence, but only when wielded with discipline and reverence. Across the East, Taoist alchemists shared a similar respect for the plant's potential. In the Bao Puzi, the 4th century sage Guhong documented cannabis as an ally in spiritual and physical longevity. Combined with herbs like ginseng, it was said to induce lucid dreams, sharpen intuition, and expand consciousness. In Taoism, every substance carries chai, the vital energy that animates existence. Cannabis, when used in harmony with the body's natural rhythms, could refine this flow, aligning the practitioner with the Tao, the universal way. Yet the Taoists were clear: an unprepared or imbalanced mind would find chaos amplified rather than clarity restored. Like a finely tuned instrument, the body and spirit had to be ready for the plant's power. Misused, cannabis could disrupt rather than elevate, a reminder that its sacredness depended on the user's inner state. In the medieval Arab world, certain Sufi mystics also recognized cannabis, particularly hashish, as a spiritual tool. For these seekers, the ultimate aim was fana, the annihilation of the ego in the presence of the divine. Hashish, used sparingly in rituals, was said to spark ecstatic visions of the beloved, the divine essence that permeates all things. Sufi poetry is filled with accounts of mystical rapture, where the boundaries of self dissolved into unity with God. Yet even among these mystics, caution prevailed. The great poet Rumi, a towering figure in Sufism, warned against relying on substances to find what already resides within. Why seek God in drunkenness if he already dances sober within you? For the Sufis, cannabis was a bridge to the divine, but only when approached with humility. When it became a crutch, it was cast aside, its sacred purpose lost. The mystical traditions of Judaism, particularly Kabbalah, offer no direct reference to cannabis, likely due to cultural or geographic differences. Yet the Zohar, a foundational Kabbalistic text, speaks to a universal truth. Those who approach the gates of divine wisdom unprepared risk being consumed by their own ignorance. In modern terms, this is a warning about the misuse of any sacred substance. Without spiritual grounding, cannabis, or any tool of enlightenment, can become a trap, inflating the ego rather than dissolving it. The Kabbalists understood that true revelation requires inner work, not shortcuts. Intriguingly, some scholars like Raphael Mechoulam and Sula Benet argue that cannabis may have played a role in ancient Judeo-Christian traditions. They point to Kane Basm, a mysterious ingredient in the anointing oils and incense of the Old Testament, which some believe was cannabis. If true, its use was far from recreational. It was a sacred act reserved for priests and prophets to enter ecstatic or visionary states. In Gnostic and Assyrian Christian communities, cannabinoid resins may have served a similar purpose, facilitating communion with the divine. But always the context was ritualistic, steeped in liturgy and intention. To use such a substance outside of its sacred framework was to profane it. In Africa and the Americas, indigenous shamanic traditions reveal a parallel reverence for cannabis and other power plants. From the Congo to the Amazon, cultures like those of the Bantu or Shipibo treat plants like ayahuasca, peyote, or cannabis as living spirits, each with a distinct purpose. The plant itself does not heal or enlighten. It is the spirit of the plant, activated through respect and ritual, that guides the seeker. In these traditions, cannabis is never consumed lightly. It is part of a ceremonial tapestry, woven with prayers, songs, and offerings to honor the forces of nature and the ancestors. In Afro-Brazilian religions like Candomblé and Umbanda, the concept of Axé, the vital impersonal energy that flows through all things, applies to plants as well. While cannabis is not central to these practices, the principle is clear. Every plant has a vibration, a purpose. To use it without understanding its axé is to invite discord, like striking a sacred drum without knowing the Orisha deity it summons. This respect for the spiritual essence of plants underscores a universal truth. Sacredness is not inherent in the substance, but in the relationship between the user and the spirit it embodies. Even among the Rastafari, where cannabis, called ganja, or the herb of wisdom, is a cornerstone of spiritual life, its use is deeply ceremonial. Smoked during reasoning sessions, gatherings of prayer, song, and meditation, ganja is a sacrament that fosters clarity and communion with Jah, the God. For Rastafari, it is not a pastime but a tool for insight, a way to align with the divine wisdom that flows through creation. Its sanctity lies in the intention behind its use, transforming a simple act into a profound ritual. Across these diverse traditions, Hindu, Taoist, Sufi, shamanic, and Rastafari, a common thread emerges. Cannabis is potential, and potential is neutral. It can be a ladder to higher consciousness or a fall into delusion, a tool for liberation or a crutch for avoidance. The plant itself is not the deciding factor. It is the user's consciousness, intention, and preparation that determine its outcome. As the Corpus Hermeticum, a cornerstone of Western esotericism, teaches, spirit does not yield to those who knock on the door drunk on themselves. Those who seek truth through shortcuts may find themselves caught in a vicious circle, chasing fleeting highs instead of lasting wisdom. This brings us to a pivotal question, one that transcends debates about legality or recreation. Is cannabis sacred? Perhaps the real question is more piercing. Are you sacred enough to use it? To approach cannabis or any sacred tool requires humility, discipline, and a willingness to confront the self. It demands that we tune our inner instrument, align our intentions, and step through the doors it opens with courage. Only then can we unlock its true potential, not as an escape, but as a mirror reflecting our deepest truths. In a world quick to commodify and polarize, cannabis remains a paradox, a plant both ordinary and extraordinary, vilified and venerated. Its history reminds us that sacredness is not found in the thing itself, but in how we engage with it. As we navigate its place in our lives, we might ask ourselves, are we seeking to open doors or merely to hide behind them? The answer lies not in the plant, but in the heart of the seeker. Every plant that opens a doorway also holds up a mirror. And mirrors, despite what we might wish, don't always reflect beauty. Sometimes they reveal truths we've dodged for lifetimes. Cannabis, like many entheogenic substances, carries a peculiar gift. It strips away masks. But not every soul is ready to face itself bare, without illusion. This is where the plant's true spiritual power kicks in, not in the fleeting high, but in the unavoidable reckoning. Carl Jung, the pioneer of analytical psychology, gave us the term shadow to describe the hidden parts of ourselves. Not evil, but everything the ego buries. Fears, traumas, forbidden urges, inherited pain. In his work, Jung argued that facing the shadow is the first step toward wholeness. Isn't it striking then that so many people, after smoking weed, feel anxiety, paranoia, or a raw sense of exposure? Cannabis doesn't create those feelings. It just peels back the polished surface of the persona, the face we show the world. What bubbles up is what's been there all along, lurking beneath. For those steeped in occult traditions, this is no shock. In Psychic Self-Defense, Dion Fortune explains how altered states, whether sparked by rituals, drugs, or trauma, can weaken the etheric field, leaving a person open to outside forces. She warns, when consciousness wavers, entities from lower realms may creep close, feeding on the emotional cracks laid bare. This isn't some spooky superstition. It's a kind of subtle psychology of energy. When the conscious mind steps back through sleep, meditation, or a joint, the unconscious takes the stage. And if that unconscious is packed with unhealed wounds, they'll start talking. What we call a bad trip is often just the soul trying to sweep its own house clean. The Raja Yoga tradition, laid out in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, gets this crystal clear. Patanjali notes that herbs can spark supernatural abilities, siddhis, but he's quick to caution that these powers are mirages without discernment in ethics. Worse, he says, chasing siddhis can block samadhi, true enlightenment, because they inflate the spiritual ego, a sneakier trap than the everyday ego. Osho, riffing on drugs and spirituality, put it bluntly, substances fling open doors that only silence should unlock. They're shortcuts, sure, but shaky ones. Too often, people who stroll through those doors without a map or guide stumble back out, dazed, unsure of where they even are. On an energetic level, cannabis hits the subtle body hard. Practitioners of Reiki, Kundalini Yoga, and ceremonial magic often report a heightened buzz in their auric field after using it. If someone's grounded, that can be a gift. But if they're not, they turn into a lighthouse with no keeper, beaming light that draws not just harmless moths, but also energetic sharks. Amazonian shamans have a saying, every plant that opens is a plant that tests. And the test isn't mystical, it's moral. What do you do with what you see? Run, reflect, or act? Plenty of long-term users describe a nagging sense of being stuck. The body chills out, but the soul hits a wall. Creativity feels like it's flowing, but it rarely takes shape. Spirituality seems profound, yet nothing really changes. Kabbalists call this kaipot, energetic shells, layers of unprocessed insights, and half-baked mystical moments that pile up like dust in the spiritual field. They mimic growth without delivering it. The real danger? Confusing feeling a ton with evolving. Not every expansion is a step up. Expansion without focus is just bloating, and bloating, sooner or later, pops. When used carelessly or excessively, cannabis morphs from a sacred plant into a trap of stagnation. It's not the plant's fault, it's the disconnected approach. Cannabis doesn't cause spiritual laziness, but it can be the perfect canvas for those already carrying it inside. Some folks push back, saying, if I feel peace, it's doing its job. But peace from a puff is like calm in a locked room, nice but fake. Real peace holds steady even in a storm, rooted deep in who you are. If cannabis hands you peace, ask yourself, is it teaching you to build that peace or just loaning you a fleeting vibe? The true meeting with the divine almost always starts with meeting the shadow. And that encounter isn't Instagram pretty. No rainbows, no soft filters. It's tears, shame, anger, confusion. But if you stick with it, breathing, present, something shifts. Not some trippy vision, but a quiet weaving together. An acceptance of what is. And from there, the seed of what could be takes root. Cannabis in this light is like a still pond. It can reflect the sky. But dive in too fast and all you'll see is mud. So tread carefully. Prep your soul. Face the shadow before chasing the light. As the mystics teach, the gates to enlightenment don't swing open for those drunk on themselves. Cannabis isn't the answer, nor the problem. It's a tool, a mirror, a portal. How you wield it decides whether you glimpse paradise or just the cracks in your own soul. In that journey, the question isn't, what does cannabis give me? It's, what am I ready to face? Only when you can stare into the mirror without flinching does cannabis become a true ally, not a siren luring you astray. The human spirit is never truly alone. Even in our most solitary moments, when we plumb the depths of our inner world, seeking meaning, transcendence, or peace, we are woven into an intricate web of collective existence. Every step we take on this inward journey reverberates outward, touching the culture that surrounds us. And in turn, the culture we inhabit shapes the contours of our soul. No spiritual practice, no moment of enlightenment, no encounter with a sacred plant is ever purely individual. Everything we touch carries the echo of the collective, and everything the collective embraces or rejects molds how we touch ourselves. Cannabis, with its ancient roots and modern metamorphoses, is a vivid testament to this truth. It is a plant that has danced through history wearing many masks, a mystical ally, a global commodity, a pop culture icon, a lightning rod for political debate, and a symbol of youthful defiance. Yet long before it was legalized or vilified, before it was branded or banned, cannabis was sacred. In certain corners of the world, it still is, a bridge to the divine, a whisper of the eternal. Consider the Rastafarian tradition, born in the crucible of 1930s Jamaica. Emerging as a defiant cry against colonialism and oppression, Rastafari was more than resistance. It was a spiritual renaissance, a reclamation of African heritage fused with biblical wisdom and a unique worldview. For Rastas, cannabis, or ganja, is not a vice or an escape. It is a vow, a sacred pact with Yah, the living God. They draw inspiration from the Book of Revelation, which speaks of the healing of the nations. In their eyes, ganja is that healing herb, a sacrament that draws the faithful closer to the divine presence. There is no casual indulgence in this act. Smoking ganja is a ritual suffused with reverence, a liturgical practice that unfolds in communal reasoning sessions. These gatherings are cathedrals of the spirit where smoke rises like incense, mingling with silence, reflection, and philosophical discourse. The collective becomes the altar, the plant, the offering. Words are weighed, hearts are opened, and the herb binds the community in shared contemplation. Here, cannabis is not a means to forget the world, but a tool to engage with it more deeply, to see, to listen, to understand. This reverence is not unique to Rastafari. Across the African continent, particularly within Bantu traditions, cannabis has long held a sacred role. Historical records describe its use in rituals marking life's milestones, celebrations, funerals, rites of passage. It was not a numbing agent to dull pain, but a guide to move through it with presence and clarity. It was a way to commune with ancestors, to weave the living into the eternal tapestry of the departed. Cannabis in these contexts was never about alienation. It was about connection, invocation, remembrance. In pre-Columbian Americas, while cannabis itself was not native, the use of psychoactive plants in collective rituals was widespread. The principle remains the same. These substances were portals to the divine, but only when cradled within a rich framework of cosmology, myth, and communal structure. Shamans, priests, and elders guided the experience, ensuring it was anchored in meaning. Without this scaffolding, the plant's power could become unmoored, reduced to mere sensation. Modernity, with its relentless drive to commodify, did exactly that. It tore cannabis from the temple and cast it into the marketplace. What was once a sacrament became a product, a meme, an aesthetic. The herb that invoked gods was repackaged as a Netflix trope, a stand-up punchline, a designer rebellion. The psychedelic counterculture of the 1960s sought to reclaim the plant's spiritual potency, inspired by voices like Alan Watts and Timothy Leary. It was a genuine quest for transcendence, a rebellion against the spiritual barrenness of a materialist world. Yet it often lacked roots, no lineage, no initiation, no enduring structure to hold the experience. People mixed cannabis with LSD, politics, and rock and roll, chasing visions but rarely integrating them. Aldous Huxley, in The Doors of Perception, had warned of this peril. The visionary experience may reveal, but it does not teach. It shows, but it does not structure. The glimpse of eternity is not the same as building a life aligned with it. Without ritual, without ethics, without community, the search for transcendence risks becoming a fleeting high. Western culture, in its dismissal of tradition, created a dangerous void, a spirituality without discipline, an ecstasy without integration, an insight without action. Cannabis, caught in this void, became a symbol of freedom and rebellion, but rarely of spiritual responsibility. Its sacred potential was overshadowed by its role as a cultural artifact, a badge of nonconformity. Yet sacred traditions endure, and they teach us a vital truth. The power of cannabis lies not in the plant itself, but in the vessel that holds it. In cultures where it remains holy, its use is collective, deliberate, and bounded by ritual. In many Afro-Amerindian practices, for instance, no one consumes the plant in isolation. Chants, drums, and cycles of cleansing frame the experience. The community acts as container, compass, and witness, ensuring the individual's journey serves the whole. The plant dissolves the ego not for escape, but for rebirth, for reconnection. This is the heart of the matter. Cannabis carries a cultural soul. It absorbs the stories, intentions, and contexts in which it is used. In the temple, it is a sacrament, guiding the faithful toward unity. In the dim glow of a solitary room, smoked to numb anxiety, it can amplify disconnection. Like water, it is malleable, taking the shape of its container. And the container of modern culture is often shallow, rushed, cynical, obsessed with surface over substance. The herb that once summoned divinities is now a marketing gimmick, its sacred history buried beneath layers of irony. But there is hope. Resistance flickers in indigenous communities that guard their traditions against spiritual extractivism. It burns in young seekers who are rediscovering ritual, fasting, and song. It glows in the quiet teachings of masters who, even in urban chaos, show how to smoke with prayer, how to listen with intention. The plant remains unchanged. What shifts is the context, the purpose, the symbolic field that gives it meaning. Perhaps this is cannabis's greatest lesson. Spirituality is not a solitary sensation, but a collective frequency. It is not about what you feel in the moment, but what you generate in the world. It is not about the visions the plant unveils, but about who you become when its effects fade. As an old African proverb reminds us, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go in a circle. Bring the drum, bring the fire, bring the plant. In this circle, we find not just cannabis's sacred past, but its potential future. A future where it is neither demonized nor trivialized, but honored as a bridge between the human and the divine, between the individual and the collective, between the fleeting and the eternal. True spirituality is not measured by the altered states you experience, but by the elevated states you sustain. The path is not revealed by the lights you see, but by what you do with the shadow those lights cast. Between the light and the fog, there's a thin line, and its name is discernment. Cannabis, like all power plants, carries no promises. It carries possibilities. Possibilities that can illuminate or confuse, inspire or numb. And it is here that the spiritual seeker reaches a crossroads. Do they seek to expand consciousness or escape it? Osho, so often misunderstood as a hedonist, said something profoundly subtle. Anything can become a meditation if you are present, and anything can become a drug if you are absent. The issue is not the plant, it is the awareness that accompanies it. And when presence is absent, the path turns into a carousel. This is why the ancients always accompanied sacred plants with rituals, fasting, chanting, silence, preparation, guidance, not out of superstition, but out of energetic hygiene. They knew what we have forgotten. A portal is not a place for sightseeing, it is a place of passage, and not every soul is ready for what lies on the other side. Discernment, called krino in Greek philosophy, viveka in Vedanta, is the invisible blade that separates what is real from what is merely sensation. It is the eye of the middle, the third eye, not as a power but as a compass. And in the spiritual use of cannabis, without that compass, what feels like enlightenment might just be hypersensitivity. What feels like vision might be a mental echo. What feels like intuition might be disguised desire. There is a kind of intoxication that feels like clarity. It comes with brilliant insights, synesthesia, synchronicities. But if these insights do not change your relationship with others, with the world, with your own shadow, then they're just spiritual fireworks, beautiful but aimless. The true path is more arid. It demands consistency. It demands presence without spectacle. It demands silence without inner noise. And that is why cannabis, used outside of a structured path, can create an addiction far subtler than the chemical one. The addiction to the feeling of spirituality without the practice of spirituality. It's easy to appear deep under the plant's effect. Harder is being deep in traffic, in the bank line, in a conflict with someone who hurt you. Enlightenment is not measured by what you see with your eyes closed. It's measured by what you do with your eyes open, feet dirty from the ground. And when there is no discernment, what cannabis does is create a fogged mirror where the ego sees itself as awakened, when in fact, it merely took a nap in the lap of sensations, a kind of vegetative peace that paralyzes more than it pacifies. In traditional occultism, there is a principle known as the false light of God, a sensation of mental clarity that is actually just the mind intoxicated with unintegrated images. It's surface brilliance without roots. Cannabis, when used without wisdom, can feed precisely that illusion, the illusion of progress while actually going in increasingly colorful circles. In every tradition, the sacred is approached with reverence, not haste, with silence, not noise. Cannabis, when returned to its rightful place as a spiritual ally, rather than a commercial object, invites us to re-examine our own inner temple. So perhaps the question was never, is this plant divine? But rather, are we willing to treat anything as divine anymore? The truth is, cannabis doesn't reveal anything we don't already carry inside. What it does, when approached with preparation, discernment, and sacred intention, is strip away the layers until only the essence remains. In that stillness, we are invited to sit face to face with ourselves, not the curated version we show the world, but the raw, silent, ancient self that remembers the language of the stars and the wisdom of the soil. That's why the plant should only be used, spiritually speaking, when the inner soil is clean, when there is a clear intention, when there is real silence before the puff, and even deeper silence afterward, when there is guidance, tradition, method, humility, and above all, when one is ready for the answer it will give. Because as the Sufi master Hafiz once said, God is like a mirror that does not laugh at your grimaces. It simply shows them clearly. Is cannabis a plant with spiritual potential? Yes, but all potential demands context, discipline, intention, and understanding. When stripped of its ritual function and turned into a cultural product, it runs the risk of becoming just another form of distraction. True spiritual seeking is a subtle art. It is not about escape, but about staying. It is not about seeing lights, but becoming light. What are you seeking when you light that joint? Is it peace, space, silence? If you cannot find those things within yourself, perhaps the plant is merely lending you a mirror, and mirrors only show the reflection. And if we can meet ourselves there, maybe the real high was never about escaping the world, but finally arriving within it. So next time you hold the herb in your hand, ask not what it will give you, ask what you're willing to give up to meet it with clarity. Because in the end, every sacred plant is a question, and the answer is who you become. If this video stirred something in you, share it with someone who is also seeking more than just smoke, someone seeking clarity, truth, and depth. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe to Top Hidden Knowledge for more explorations into spirituality, wisdom, and the mysteries that bind us all.